this story of Olympus. You had worked for Olympus for many years.
30 years, 3 decades.
Yeah, and you'd worked your way up. You were even something of a protege of the president of the company.
Yeah, I joined as a salesman in 1980, and I was then took responsibility for businesses in America, all of Europe, Russia, Middle East, Africa, and then finally asked to be the president of Olympus.
And Olympus, we should say, most people think of it as a camera company, don't they? But that's actually a small part of what it does.
No, Olympus employs 40,000 people. At the time I took over, it had a market capitalization of $10 billion. And has 70% of the endoscope market. And basically, wherever there's a natural orifice, they can put these. And where there isn't one with keyhole surgery, they can put them.
Okay, so tell us the tale. You arrive, you're president of the company. Just take it through for people who don't know the story.
Yeah. Everything was going dandy until I was in Hamburg in July, joined the heat wave of 2011. And a friend who also happens to be a main board director of one of Japan's largest companies, I gave him a pseudonym in my book called Goro, because if it was known that he was the person who helped Gaijin Woodford, he would be ostracized from the business community in Japan. And he told me...
He tipped you off.
He said that a small magazine called Factor, a specialist journal, had made allegations that Olympus had bought 3 small companies with almost no turnover for $1 billion. A company selling face cream by mail order, a plastic plates for microwaves company, really no synergy with the business, but $1 billion, that was 2 years' profits of the entire corporation. It was so obviously wrong.
So you've been told about this weird allegation that sounds totally ridiculous.
I didn't believe it. The then chairman, the previous president, Kikukawa-san, was like my favorite uncle. He had promoted me when I got an MBE. He bought me a Mont Blanc and took me to a nice restaurant. I was very fond of him, and I just didn't believe it. But first weekend I was back in Tokyo after I'd received the email in Hamburg. I went to a hot spring resort with Goro, my friend, and he translated the Factor article, and it was substantiated and detailed and inexplicable. So I came in on the Monday. I got 2 colleagues and said, have you seen 2 colleagues I trusted, a woman and a man, both Japanese, but I trusted them, and said, have you seen this? And they said, yes, we know about it. Mr. Kikukawa-san has told both of us and the whole executive floor not to discuss it with you. So there was the chairman telling my own staff for the president not to be informed about allegations. It turned out to be the biggest ever corporate scandal in Japan. And that's when I got a horrible feeling that something very bad and unpleasant going on at the company of which I was president and responsible for.
And so you said, well, I'm not going to let this just die or bury it or anything like that. So then you stir it up, basically.
The very next day, I had a meeting at 8 o'clock with a national electronics company in Japan, and just myself and Kikukawa-san were going. And I thought at the end of this meeting, he would say, Michael, let's go for some green tea, but he didn't. And I then asked for a meeting that day. The meeting was set at lunchtime. That was the only time he could meet with me. And I went in a large boardroom, and he was sitting where you're sitting on that side of the table. But in front of him, he had a great platter of sushi, luxury sushi, which is my favorite food. In front of me was a tuna sandwich. And it was a manky tuna sandwich at that. There was no lettuce or crisps around it.
It wasn't even a burger.
A British Rail buffet in 1980s would not have been proud of this sandwich. And that was to tell me, because I had pushed and insisted upon this meeting, that I was the tuna sandwich in the food chain and the chairman was the luxury sushi.
Let's jump a little bit. So you basically you report it to the accountants. You ask to get the facts. You go to.
I write 6
you
letters.
Call the board.
6 letters. Forensically, who did we buy these companies from? How did we value them? Where are the board minutes, etc., etc. And it culminated in letter number 6, where I asked for the resignation of the chairman and the vice president Mori-san, and I knew if they were going to go quietly, which would have been in their interest and for the good of the company, because I wanted to bring in forensic accountants, that I would have been called to a small meeting. But instead, an extraordinary board meeting was called for Friday, October the 14th, and I knew there and then I was going to be fired.
Right, so rather than getting rid of them, they got rid of you.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason that they had done this dodgy deal, buying 3 companies worth almost nothing for $1.5 billion, it was because they'd made some appalling losses in derivatives trades earlier, and they just needed to hide the losses
high-risk investments. We still, to this day, don't know exactly what
Right.
they were or the scale of those. But this dirty secret went back 3 presidents, and it was trying to cover the losses.
You were possibly brought in as someone who would be sort of an outsider, but who probably wouldn't spot any of this stuff. I mean,
I don't think
know
so.
that?
Olympus was one of the most indebted corporations in Japan. They desperately needed free cash flow, profit, in simple words. And I had shown how this wonderful healthcare business, probably the best healthcare franchise in the world, could deliver outstanding results. And that's what they needed. They needed me.
Right.
If
and they just hoped they'd get away with it.
people say, what's the difference between Japan and elsewhere? Fraud takes place, Enron and WorldCom, and we could go on, Bernie Madoff. The difference, a month after I'd been fired, the share price of Olympus had fallen $7 billion. 82% of the value of the company had been lost. Yet the institutional shareholders, the 3 mega banks and the largest insurance company, would not utter one word of criticism of the incumbent board. And then the Supreme Court judge, Kainaka, retired Supreme Court judge, who investigated the Olympus scandal, said the Olympus board is a board of yes men, because 14 people went along with the decision to fire me. And it's rotten to the core. And even after that, the institutional shareholders in Japan would not break ranks.
What a fascinating story.